a very important image was attacked that day. The image of this Van Gogh painting, an iconic historic piece of art. A very important image. Every day in our nation, the image of God is attacked and destroyed, more than 500 of them, in the womb. And I have no hesitation in saying each one of those babies matters far more. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of About Abortion. This week in the news, you may have seen this. Okay, and here today with me is Christian Hacking to discuss this. Now, Christian, there will be a few out there who are audio-only listeners, so they will have not been able to appreciate the visuals there. Just talk us through what happened there. What's the context? What's the news story?
Okay, so in that video, you just saw two women. Basically, they come up to the famous Van Gogh sunflower image, currently in one of the rooms of the National Gallery. They take off their trench coats, revealing a political, stopping drill message on their shirts. They quickly open up two tins of Heinz tomato soup. The introduction of the new kind of can opening, obviously making it a lot easier. No need for a can opener on this occasion. They toss the soup in symmetry over the Van Gogh painting, and they then stick themselves, or they faff about a bit trying to super glue their hands to the wall, at which point the lady on the left viewing the image, who basically has pink hair and has a good speaking voice. My wife actually thought it was a politician on the YouTube video, then makes this statement beginning with, what's worth more, art or life? And then holds up the empty can of Heinz tomato soup as she makes this impassioned call. And after about a minute and 15 seconds of this, security then usher everyone out the room. And the rest is, a special police squad that has to then scrape their hands off the wall and take them down to the police station for processing. That happened I think 3-4 days ago, something like that.
And they are now facing, I believe, criminal charges for damage. The painting, as it turns out, was covered in glass, wasn't it? So the painting itself thankfully wasn't damaged. That's about, I think, £70 million worth of painting there, but there was damage done to the frame. And of course, had there not been glass there, it would have been an incredibly costly stunt. So they are facing criminal charges, and it's sparked a bit of a discussion, hasn't it? Are these tactics right? Is this driving people further away from their cause? Is this the way to try and persuade people? And I thought it'd be helpful for us to talk about why we don't throw soup at paintings in our activism. I mean, that question, what matters more, art or life? Let's start there. What do you make of that sort of point? I mean, do we have just a carte blanche just to go and sort of destroy anything we consider to be less valuable than the thing we're advocating for?
Well, yeah. I mean, you don't really need to vandalize a kind of internationally acclaimed art piece to pose that question. Of course, life matters more than art. The issue really with a stunt like this is it basically bites off far more than it can chew, in terms of bringing Van Gogh's painting into it, bringing criminal damage into it, combining oil and the living crisis and a bit of product placement from Heinz means you quickly lose not only credibility for people who for most of us who are law-abiding citizens, but you also you lose the audience as to exactly the point that you're making. And so the first I actually knew of this, Dave, was listening to LBC radio. I do confess I do listen to LBC, and yeah, basically a spokesperson for these women turned up and said, look, we all know the painting's covered in glass or plastic. It's not going to get damaged. The point here is not over the painting. The point here is what about, the issue of the oil and the blah, blah, blah. But I just, when he said that, I was like, no, 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 no. Like, we've got to talk about the painting because it's the painting that's just been vandalized,
Yeah.
and so I think all of these features, need to be addressed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a very sort of extreme version, isn't it, of attention seeking. It's a stunt. I mean, to my knowledge, Van Gogh wasn't an oil man. Or at least oil paintings, perhaps, yes,
Yeah.
but crude oil, I think, no. And so, although they want us to then immediately with them change the subject to what they want to talk about, all we are still talking about is the Van Gogh painting, as you say. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself very well to focusing, and good activism is all about focus, isn't it, of the attention, the people you're trying to reach. It doesn't do that, but it is worth saying that the point of what matters more, art or life. Of course, one doesn't need to choose between those two things, but a very important image was attacked that day. The image of this Van Gogh painting, an iconic historic piece of art, a very important image. Every day in our nation, the image of God is attacked and destroyed, more than 500 of them in the womb. And I have no hesitation in saying each one of those babies matters far more than a painting. And it is a greater outrage. I think it was outrageous, the throwing of paint at this beautiful painting. I think that was outrageous. It is a greater outrage by far that one of these image bearers should be not only attacked but successfully destroyed in the womb every day. I have no hesitation in saying that those lives matter more than this painting. And yet, no matter how convicted we are of that truth, we're not resorting to measures like general destruction just because those babies matter more. So let's talk a bit more about why. I think it's helpful how you mentioned that they bite off more they can chew. That they've changed the subject before they've even raised the conversation. But let's talk a bit about this idea of disruption. Some of these activists are claiming support from the history of social reform, saying, look, civil disobedience is the way you get change. You basically need to kind of almost bully people, sort of twist their arms into change. What's true about that? What's not true about that?
Yeah, so one of the phrases that we use a lot in our work is you have to make the cost of maintaining the status quo unbearable. That's a tenet in all social reform history. So clearly in any if there's an issue that society doesn't want to address, they're not going to address it spontaneously without some level of disruption, right? So in that regard, these activists have employed that facet of social reform quite effectively, okay, which is they have disrupted the kind of peaceful ambience of the not only of the room in which the art thing, and you hear the man, there's a man in the background who he kind of screams in horror. He's like, oh, it's like this, like he's been kind of kicked, right? And there's something powerful about that, which is there's art is creative, right? Art is a facet of being made in the image of God, is which we create like God created us. We go on to create other things, and that's why art is especially fine art and art that was informed by the kind of Christian enlightened principles as opposed to the reductive, postmodern principles. It's a sub creation of God's creation. So when destructive force comes against it, it's kind of it does produce a visceral reaction. The only problem is the person who says afterwards security. It's kind of like anyway. It was I don't know why he was questioning whether he should be calling security. It was kind of anyway.
Maybe he was just hoping there was security in the building, but
yeah, maybe what? Maybe
it's just a cry for help, not being confident it even existed.
But I think maybe it's just whoever said that was probably used to the fact that vandals and road blockers are being supported by the law. And it, can we really expect security to come to our aid to stop people from destroying paintings, etc.? So from a disruption point of view, they're onto something. But the question is, what are you disrupting and how are you disrupting it, right? So take, for example, Martin Luther King Jr. You've got the bus boycotts was a famous thing, inspired by Rosa Parks and others, and basically he persuaded the black population and those who wished to ally from the white population to basically stop taking buses. Okay, it wasn't damaging people's property. It wasn't cajoling or bullying people into a certain point of view, but it was saying that if you're not going to let us ride equally on a bus, then we just won't ride on the buses, right? So it did have a disruptive impact, but the message was clear, right? It was all about the right to travel on a bus just like everyone else, and if that right wasn't going to be recognized, then they won't travel on the bus. So even in the disruption, you are immediately directly coming and hitting back on the question that Martin Luther King is trying to pose. Again, one of the issues of this protest is within a kind of a few syllables, you're entering into kind of like abstract, cause after cause after cause. It's not, what's more important, art or life? It's like how many steps are there in that mathematical equation? So I think it's very hard for the public to come in and say, okay, that makes total sense. I can see why they destroyed, that, or attempted to destroy that national art piece, etc. So I think there's, I think from the disruption point of view, they not only disrupted, they got a lot of media coverage, which you could argue was a success, but the issue is the kind of disruption that they caused doesn't lend itself to the message that they're trying to convey, and it also the disruption is of such a violent and destructive nature that, again, it's hard for people to I think for the public at whole to get behind it and be like, yeah, fantastic, good on you.
It is, you could say it's almost a civilian target they picked on there. What was so different about Martin Luther King's approach, and a lot of people claim support from him. They want to be seen as in line with his methods, but they don't really know or understand his methods necessarily that well. Everything he did, not to say he didn't, he made mistakes, but the key actions for which he and the movement are remembered, and the actions that helped to move the ball down the pitch were very, very much targeted on the issue itself. So it was, as you say, the bus boycott. Why? Because black people weren't allowed to travel in the same way on buses as white people. It was huge numbers of people turning up to register to vote, knowing that it was their legal right to, but at the same time they were going to be refused by dishonest clerks. You've got people asking just to peacefully march, and knowing they'll be denied that permission, and then doing it anyway. This is not general vandalism. It's not having a go at the nation at large. It's focusing the action on the problem itself. And I think good activism is always focused on where the problem is or who the problem is, and bringing pressure to bear there, rather than sort of generally causing trouble to people who are just trying to go about their normal business. So we've got, as well as the paint thing, of course, you've got people lying on roads, blocking traffic, ambulances can't get to where they're going,
fathers trying to get their children to hospital, etc.
Right, yeah. So these are sort of real, you could say these are just innocent passers-by. They're civilians. They many of them may well passionately agree with the activists already, and yet they're still being harmed in the sort of crossfire. But perhaps we should clarify something before we go any further, which is the work we do isn't protest work anyway, is it? We don't protest. We're not protesters. Sometimes we're called protesters, but actually we're not.
So we don't protest abortion. We show abortion for what it is, and abortion protest itself. And really, our work is an educational work, and it's a persuasion work, right? So it's not a protest work; it's a persuasion work. And so when we go out onto the streets, we hold up the images depicting the reality and value of unborn children and the reality of abortion, we never block roads. We don't block pathways. We never use audio devices to amplify our message, etc. So we're 100% law abiding in that regard, and the disruption we cause is far more on a kind of emotional, visual level, because people are being confronted with something that they think is the termination of a pregnancy or or sexual reproductive rights. So our disruption is more of a psychological kind of rewiring of what abortion does, which is fundamentally different. But to these people with their soup and their vandalism, I think what is crucial though is any social reform movement has to persuade the common people who are on the fence on an issue to come on your side, right? And this is an escalation in kind of some of the eco anti-oil tactics I've seen. It's basically penalizing the common people, right? It's not actually holding power to account. It's not exerting pressure on the institutions and the elite and the decision makers. It's basically just penalizing common people trying to get to work, trying to potentially on an urgent errand, on the motorway, etc. So I think this is where one of some of these new protest techniques fall down, is they're not actually getting the common people on board. Like, if for example, they keep telling me, all the science, all the latest research says that the world is going to end in 45 minutes. Like, why isn't there an eco group, with a big billboard just outlining that evidence outside my local tube station? Because then I can engage with them and think, okay, gosh, you guys do have a point. What you're saying does have evidence, and now on my commute, I can consider whether what you're saying is true. It's this kind of it's kind of these two tomato soup people, they've missed out. They've jumped over the persuasion stage. They're not persuading me of the issue. They're just on this occasion. And also on this occasion, it's a public gallery. Like, it's for the public. So it's a gift to the public, paid by the taxpayer, to allow people to access art. It's like you can't get any more unelite in that regard, and yet that's where they're choosing to mount their campaign. So I think strategically not a good idea. It's a protest without persuasion, and what we try to do at CBR UK is to be very strategic about where we do it, who we're trying to persuading the common people, and making persuasion and the facts the kind of core of what we do, as opposed to any other kind of feature.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, I think, that even those who are sympathetic to the cause that these two young women were standing up for, even those are divided over whether this was a good idea, whether this has helped the cause. It's made people angry. Plenty of people who support their point of view have said this is not the right way to go about it, and that's a cause that enjoys a huge amount of support in the mainstream media. I mean, the newspapers, the news channels, all the institutions, the banks. I mean, I got a bank card the other day, and it was celebrating that it was made of 85% recycled plastic. It's everywhere. This agenda is almost totally accepted by all the powers and so on. Of course, these activists say, well, it's not enough, but fundamentally, the whole of mainstream culture already agrees, and yet still, they didn't take kindly to this kind of activism. If we stood up and did something like this as pro-lifers, we would actually obliterate any kind of platform or hearing we might have managed to build up, and give a very easy excuse for anyone to dismiss our message. So certainly my very strong encouragement to any pro-lifers out there, anti-abortion activists, is do not mimic these antics. They will do damage to the cause. We of all people cannot afford to just throw our toys out the pram and sort of vandalize things as if that's going to advance the cause. It really, really isn't. But actually, the simple truth, the reality of abortion itself is so disruptive that actually what we're advocating and what we do is in a sense very unradical. It's very simple. We are merely pulling the curtains back and showing people what this thing actually is. I mean, you can't get any more basic than that. We're just showing what this thing is, and the plain sight reality of abortion protests itself so, you could say, violently, so compellingly, so arrestingly, that, you know, on the odd occasion we've even had people persuade the police to shut us down, not successfully, thankfully, but people experience just the plain reality of abortion as so confronting. They want to call it an act of violence and a crime, when all we're doing is showing what is itself a legal procedure. How can it be a crime to show the reality of a legal procedure? Well, maybe the pictures are beginning to do their work there, showing that this thing that we're calling healthcare is in fact itself an act of violence so horrific that we don't even want to see it.
And I guess one parallel is the attempts that CBI UK have had, some successful in the past, of people trying to deface our images to cover up what an unborn baby looks like in the womb, or what an abortion procedure looks like, you know, which is we have this, it's just the truth. People are trying, you know, it's the, as opposed to intentionally going to, going into an art gallery to destroy something that is beautiful, or attempt to, you know, you've got people on the street who are trying to cover up or destroy the image of what an unborn baby looks like, because they hate the notion that that basically, you know, they're being held to account for the 214,000 unborn babies that we're killing each year, 250,000 of which were flushed down the toilet in the last couple of years. So
150.
No, it's what, over the last 2 years?
Oh, sorry, last 2 years. Sorry, yes.
Yeah. So over the last 2 years, it's about 250 since DIY abortion was brought in. So what you're forcing people to do is you're forcing people to respond not to your tactics but to the issue. You're forcing people to respond not to your framing of it, but to the actual victim. And I think that's really, anyone listening to this podcast, really, that's the, you know, even if you are, say, eco rights activist, you've got to make the issue the issue, right? And that's just, it's that simple. People who need to be responding to the issue, not some transcendental, attempt to try to make the issue relevant. And I think that's what's so crucial. And so one of the things we get the most pushback for as an organization is our postcard campaign, where we basically post postcards into people's homes, detailing just what an unborn baby looks like in the womb, non-graphic, and also just some of the facts around abortion statistics in recent years. And again, people say, you can't be doing this, I've got kids in the house, or I've had a miscarriage, or I don't want to be having a conversation about this right now, not according to my consent, right? And of course you've got tension there, you've got disruption, you've forced a conversation in the home that wouldn't have otherwise been had. So you can see some of the principles at play. But ultimately, what is at the core of that? Well, it's the discussion around whether this unborn baby is a human being.
Yeah.
And why, as an organization, do we think it's okay for us to be encouraging and forcing that conversation in homes? Well, it's because that's where abortion bills are currently being posted. Yeah. So you see, so the difference between what we do and what some of these other activists for other things do is we try really making the issue and really getting the victim into the center of the discussion, as opposed to our can of Heinz soup.
Yeah, and the only reason there's any tension or discomfort at all, I mean, a picture of a living human embryo, on what planet is that offensive or graphic or unwelcome, it's only precisely because we're in a society that is killing those human beings at scale, hundreds every day. If we weren't doing that, there would be no reason why this picture would be offensive or unwelcome. So it really kind of purifies the conversation and says, actually, this right here is the issue. These are human beings. That's undeniable. We know that. We've got more evidence than ever of just how alive and kicking they are, and yet we are killing them every day in hundreds, and it's just by spotlighting that reality, it is that's causing the tension. Of course, people will try and claim it's because of who we are or where we're doing this or whatever, but none of that would matter if we weren't doing what we're doing as a society. None of that would cause discomfort. It's the issue itself, and it's having that brought to the surface and look us in the face and say this is what we're doing as a nation. That's why it's deeply uncomfortable. That's really helpful. I'm reminded actually of I don't know if you remember this in the same way, Christian, but the first time I came out on a display, you got into this just slightly before I did, and when I think you told me you were doing something that to me sounded like a sort of picket, and my honest sort of knee-jerk reaction was, oh no, this sounds at best a bit pointless, embarrassing at worst. This is really inappropriate, and I came out to take a look, half expecting that I'd have to drag my friend away from this scene where he was, engaging in something, as I say, at best fruitless, at worst wrong, morally wrong. And I had, I guess, all the images planted in my brain from mainstream media as to what a pro-life protest, and I probably would have used that terminology, would look like. I had the sort of Hillsborough Baptist sort of, the placards, God hates gays, whatever it is, that's how we've been trained to think about pretty much any public Christian or pro-life sort of,
like mega hats.
Yeah.
Is it Mecca? Mega, was it Mecca?
MAGA, I think. Mecca is the place that Muslims go to on pilgrimage. I mean, I guess some people might have Mecca hats as well.
I think a Mecca. I don't think a Mecca hat would cause any offence.
No, you'd probably be right with the Mecca hat. The Guardian would definitely give you a much wider berth with a Mecca hat than a MAGA. But anyway, when I arrived on the scene, nothing could have been further from my expectations. It was 4 or 5 people with a single banner, I think, big banner, showing the reality of this procedure we call abortion, showing a baby who's had violence done to them through surgical abortion. 4 or 5 people quietly standing there, and as passers-by were sort of walking within sort of normal speaking voice range, engaging them in conversation. What do you think about abortion? And rational discourse, showing the evidence, asking questions, hearing what people have to say, and challenging their thinking, and in many cases persuading them. And I found that so compelling so quickly that, having come out as a real skeptic, I actually turned around straight away, joined the team, got some leaflets, and got stuck in, and have never looked back. It was so different from what I'd been trained to expect, and that's as someone who was at that time even very, very sort of passionately and sort of decidedly anti-abortion, pro-life, and yet even then, I assumed that the only kind of pro-life activism that exists is awful.
Well, I'm delighted I managed to persuade you to join our.
Well, I didn't say you persuaded me. I mean,
I like to think so.
I'm very grateful. You got there before I did.
Well, now you are, running your own project for CBI UK. So yeah, it's an amazing story. But yes, I mean, when I first joined the ranks of CBI UK, I basically went traveled out to Ireland to put the matter to bed, and I thought I was meeting a bunch of, American far right fanatic misogynists, and then I discovered that only one of them was American, none of them were far right, and just a couple of them are post-abortive, and I realized, gosh, what I've been taught to believe about pro-life activists was incredibly misleading, and I think we all at some point in our journey have to go through that pain barrier. And it's particularly relevant because right now we've got these buffer zones. For those if you don't know, that there's 3 current buffer zones in the United Kingdom, in Manchester, Richmond and Ealing. But just of a week ago, Bournemouth introduced the UK's largest buffer zone, which is basically a zone where you're not allowed to engage with anyone for or against abortion, or engage in any act of prayer or sketching, for that matter. Anyway, this Bournemouth PSPO, as what it's known as, is 15 times the size of a football pitch, right? And it's all been bought in on this on the notion that some form of grievous harassment and intimidation is going on outside of these clinics, right? And the mainstream media, or the Bournemouth Echo, has been the main protagonist in the area, has basically just lapped it up to say, if you pose the question, do you think it's okay for women to be harassed outside of abortion clinics? No, like 99.9% of people are going to be like, absolutely not. So it's like, do you think we should criminalize that? Absolutely, right? But that's assuming that that's what's happening. And the reality is, what is really happening is people normally from Catholic or Protestant faith backgrounds are engaging in prayer, offering support and help to women outside of these clinics, and basically they are now being criminalized for that, which raises this really interesting question, which is, why are people allowed to walk into the National Gallery and throw soup over, a national masterpiece, but someone engaging someone from Bournemouth here, we're not talking like, the hyper-liberal capital of the UK, someone from Bournemouth who's praying outside the Orphea Road abortion clinic can now be arrested for doing that. It's kind of like, what is going on here? And what this suggests to me is gross double standards when it comes to expressive rights, and just this insidious, quiet clamping down on people who are saying that it's wrong to kill babies. It is an awful irony that at a time when we've got all these other activists stepping up their game and causing huge, dangerous disruption, it is, in the case of Bournemouth, almost, and I know some of these people personally, almost all of them are women in the second half of their lives. Some of them are very, very elderly, really, women, peacefully praying. That's all they're doing, and offering support, perhaps, if someone approaches them. That's all they're doing. And it does show how deep the deception of the media is able to go. The fact that you and I, and this was after years of talking through this issue and being very convinced we needed to do something, even then, we had been conditioned by the media as to what pro-life activism looked like. And the media is continuing to do very much the same to this day. The questions like, do you think it's wrong to harass? I mean, it assumes a whole bunch of things. So firstly, it assumes that it's not already illegal for women to be harassed outside abortion clinics. Of course it is. Harassment and intimidation are illegal anywhere and everywhere in the UK. You can't harass a woman anywhere. It also suggests that that's what pro-lifers are doing, and they're not. Categorically, no. In the whole of Great Britain, there has never been any harassment or intimidation of women outside abortion clinics. How can I say that so categorically? Because there's never been a prosecution. No one's ever been found guilty of doing that. And I can tell you for sure, we're being watched like hawks whenever we are doing anything outside these clinics. There's no evidence of any harassment or intimidation, which would already have been enough to have someone convicted.
because it's not happening. And then it also suggests that what then did happen, what these buffer zones actually impose, it suggests that those merely stop acts of harassment or intimidation, but they don't. They stop even crossing yourself in silent prayer. They stop sprinkling of water. I mean, you and I, obviously, we're not Roman Catholics. We don't do those things. But it's horrifying all the same to see such a direct attack on religious freedom that in certain areas of Great Britain you can't even silently cross yourself. I mean, what nation are we living in?
I've actually calculated it on a spreadsheet, but it works out at around 200,000 square meters now in the United Kingdom. It's illegal to pray. And how interesting is it that the first places where prayer is being made illegal in the United Kingdom is where they're sacrificing children? Like, if that's not a tweet for your Brephos Twitter page, I don't know what is, because it seems to me clear as day what is going on here, which is if you worship darkness, if you worship Molech, if you worship the spirit of the age, and if you're sacrificing children to the spirit of the age, then that is exactly the kind of place where you don't want Christians praying and bearing witness. And so underneath all of this, false evidence and you kind of new new definitions conjured up by the radical left, I see a very dark, insidious agenda, which is getting the Christians as far away as they can from the place where they're needed most. And this is why I'm actually excited about the future. This is why that even if in God's sovereignty nationwide buffer zones do come in this afternoon, under this Rupa Huck amendment, obviously we pray that it doesn't happen, but even if it did, I think it's only going to set the field for the kind of salty, bright shining that the church needs to do in this area.
Yeah, and it does prove, doesn't it, that the abortion lobby, the providers, feel very threatened by peaceful, calm, respectful praying and education and offer of support outside clinics. They are really upset about it. I've spoken with an international director of Mary Stopes International, one of the main abortion providers worldwide, and he said they discuss at an international board level when it's 40 days for life, when it's prayer time, because they see the impact on their business. They're terrified of prayer, and they hate people seeing the reality of abortion. And so you've got to ask, as our dear friend Greg Cunningham in the States, with his military background, from time to time reminds us, you need to ask the enemy, what is it we're doing that bothers you? What bothers you? Not what makes us feel great, or what do our supporters like, or what kind of goes down well with the passers-by, but what are we doing that bothers you? And clearly this kind of activism bothers the abortion industry. They feel very much harassed and intimidated by prayer and by the truth getting out, because oppressors, those who hold the reins of injustice, those who are perpetrating genocides, they feel really harassed when someone stands up and exposes what they're doing. They hate it. It really upsets them, because genocides thrive on being covered up and denied, and that's why they're generally done in faraway places or behind walls, or in the dead of night, or in you think about the slave trade happening out of sight and out of mind in the West Indies, so that the ordinary Englishman or woman never saw that stuff. Genocide perpetrators hate it when people draw attention to what it is they're actually doing. And so Christians, pro-lifers, people of goodwill need to sit up and pay attention and learn to read through the media and see what is actually going on here. And what's actually going on is those with a vested interest, often a financial interest, in the industrial killing of human babies want to keep the truth about that as far away from the location where that's happening.
Well,
and that's what we do, isn't it? That is our entire strategy is unveiling the injustice and challenging people's perception of it. And in that sense, again, what we're calling people to, we're not standing here saying we need an army of people to throw soup. We're not looking for people to glue themselves to things. We're not asking for people to lie down on busy motorways and cause sort of unilateral disruption. All we're asking for is people to step forward and say, I'm willing to hold a picture that shows the reality of what's going on in our nation. I'm willing to hold a picture showing the humanity of the baby in the womb and all its majesty. I'm willing to hold a picture showing what abortion actually is. And we're looking for people who are willing to engage peacefully and respectfully with passers-by, with anyone who's willing to engage and make the case for life. And of course, the victims of this injustice are the most voiceless people group ever. There is no people group more vulnerable, more oppressed, or more voiceless. And if we can't see that as an urgent, pressing priority for us to be voices for the very most voiceless, then I question whether we have any notion whatsoever of what it means to stand up for justice. The protester we played the clip of at the beginning there talked about justice. What matters more, art or justice? And we don't have our ABCs in justice if we can't see this is the greatest injustice, not only of our day but of all history, just numerically speaking. And therefore, standing up against this injustice has got to be a driving priority.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe someone listening to this podcast is doing so because they were Googling the soup protesters. But the point is this: is whilst the cost of living matters, whilst not destroying our planet matters to God, nothing matters more than not killing our children, because when we do that, we bring a curse upon ourselves and upon our nation, and we defile our land and we pollute our land in a way that is far more culpable than an oil spill. And so, yeah, I hope that there may be some people listening to this who actually, they want to do something about injustice in the world. They're not sure what to do, but I hope people listening to this will think, actually, here's a group of people who have their heads screwed on. They will take principles of social reform, but they will apply them in a way that is effective, which doesn't penalize just the common person, but actually persuades the common person to come on board, and in a way that doesn't go through multiple abstract links before we finally get to the issue. It's kind of, but actually says, no, here's the issue. Abortion is very simple. It intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, any country that is going to legalize that and support that, encourage that, is going heading in an incredibly dire direction that needs to be rectified immediately. So I think that's my hope, and I hope that as you've heard us speaking about this stuff, you'd see where the boundaries are for effective social reform, and also just like downright lunacy and vandalism and criminal activity, and it's a shame, really. I mean, I would have quite liked to eat those soups. It would have been far better use.
Well, I've written to Heinz.
Have you? Have they given a statement on this?
I don't know if they've given a statement, but I as you know, our sponsorship drive has not been very successful so far. I've got bad news on the Shaw for Men front.
Oh, do you?
They're owned by Unilever as well. Same as
Unilever
Lynx.
Community.
Yes. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. So I wrote to Heinz, see if they'd sponsor us, and I said I can guarantee we'll never throw your soup at anyone or anything, no matter how strongly we feel about our cause. So we'll see what they say. We focused a lot on.
They'll probably write back to you saying that they're owned by Unilever as well.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see what they say. Unilever. I got a reasonable response from Unilever. It wasn't quite as hostile as I expected, but we'll see.
Eventually, we'll get there. We'll get
We'll get
endorsed
there.
by someone.
Someone
and
will have.
Blessed is the first company that does it.
Well, this is what I said to Heinz. I said, not only will we not throw your product at things, you will also have the opportunity of being the first major brand to be on the right side of history with regard to the great injustice of our day. So
Nice.
one hopes that Heinz has the sort of historical sort of gravitas to kind of get a sense of how the generations change, and maybe they can have the foresight to choose rightly. We'll see. We've talked a lot about our activism in terms of where we position ourselves, our conduct, the use of pictures. We haven't spoken much about the actual conversations we have, the method of apologetics. We'll pick that up another time. But I just wanted to close things with just a scripture actually I read this morning, as it happens in my daily readings. I'm in Proverbs at the moment. Proverbs, I think, is full of wisdom for how to engage with friends, with enemies, with those who agree with you, and so on. And just came across this morning. It's Proverbs 15, verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And it's interesting that when you, of course, anger people, especially if you're angering them deliberately, the walls go up and rational discourse becomes more and more difficult. What people perhaps don't realise about the work we do on the streets, if they've never seen it in real life, is just how often the opposite's taking place. We often have people come up to us full of anger, but by God's grace we're able to speak a gentle word which turns away wrath. And very often, in fact, I was in Bournemouth just the other day with the team there, and a young couple came up and went straight in with with a sort of what about rape, what about sexual crime, quite het up, and we've got a method not only in our tone and our conduct but in our apologetics kind of training. We've got a method for sort of absorbing that, haven't we? We take that hit of anger. We've learned how to absorb that and just kind of neutralize, take some of the energy off that and turn that into a fruitful conversation. And that particular conversation with this young couple, they had a couple of, I think they're twin boys maybe, in prams. By the end of that conversation, although the guy was much more persuaded than the lady, she was really very pro-abortion right up till birth. We're all sort of pro-choice absolutist. His mind was changed a lot more. But with both of them, it finished on amicable terms. We all shook hands, have a nice day, off they went. And I trust they went with something to think about. And we'll talk about that in another episode. But as well as the pictures, we've got our words. And we found that to be such a dynamite combination on the streets and online and in any context. The pictures change how people sort of see the issue very viscerally. You sort of see, wow, this thing I thought was healthcare, I'm seeing it's actually horrific. But then the words kind of help people's brains to catch up with that, to kind of connect those dots. And because a lot of their worldview is sort of being sort of dragged along like off the back of a chariot quite uncomfortably, where they're half their head's already gone with the pictures, and yet they're also saying, well, hang on, I've been taught it's a woman's right to choose, and so the apologetics can kind of help pick up that sort of disconnect and help people to rewire their thinking. And I don't know about you, Christian, but I can honestly say I've never been out on the streets doing the public education work and not had at least one conversation where people's minds,
that's exactly
haven't changed to some degree.
Yeah. But this is exactly the point. Is whilst the truth speaks, the truth has to be accompanied by relationship and embodied character, and that's why we do spend a large proportion of our work standing next to our images so we can field those kind of discussions, because people do still take a bit of persuading. And going back to the start point, if you've made it this far on the podcast, is that kind of conversation is not, you can't have it if you've got one hand glued to a wall, and the way that the lady with the pink hair rubbed her hands together, she couldn't even shake your hand afterwards, because you may stick herself to you. Like the point is it's not conducive for actually having that conversation that needs to be had to take people on in their journeys. And yeah, we do. Our teams are highly trained to handle those conversations and to handle them well. And there's been loads of times where even people that we fundamentally disagree with, we've hugged at the end, or people who said, well, I'm pro abortion and you're not going to change my mind, but good work. It's kind of like, why do they say that? Why? It's like something deep inside them knows that it's good to have respectful people challenging the way society thinks, and I like to think we at CBI UK do that exceptionally well.
And again, that's the Martin Luther King dictum, isn't it? Whom you would change, you must first love, and they must know that you love them. And it's also been said, people won't necessarily remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. And by God's grace, I think we're able to put that into practice, not perfectly, but effectively. What's the call to action then, Christian? Where can people go if they want to get involved in this kind of activism?
If you've made it this far, or if our editor has moved this section further up in the video, you need to join us at www.cbiuk.org/join. And this is our Join the Movement page, in which wherever you are in the country, it's our kind of entry into getting you active on this issue. And so by joining that, we can not only connect you to teams in your area if they exist, but if they don't, we can pull you into our national mobilized call, in which we can help to equip you to take your first steps towards effective social reform. And we'll address many questions along the way, but that is by far the best way to the best first step is to join that. And I host those calls last Thursday of every month, just to kind of get people off the runway and into the air on this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christian. That's cbiuk.org/join. Well, thanks so much for listening in, everybody. We've enjoyed this conversation. Hope you have too. If you have, please do share it with a friend. Send it to someone who's maybe never thought about this stuff before. Do comment, send any questions in. We do read those. We'll address them in due course. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
It's worth noting, if you do join the movement, you don't need to bring tomato soup or super glue with you on that call.
No, it's all provided. It's all provided.